We all love Jackson's chameleons, but one thing many people don't know is that a Jackson's chameleon is actually a group of subspecies. There are many forms of the Jackson's chameleon. There are 3 recognized subspecies, and we know that one of those subspecies most likely is going to be broken up into a number of other subspecies and possibly species. So there could be some confusion. This video, we're going to clear up that confusion and introduce you to the different subspecies of Jackson's chameleon. Now, the most common subspecies is the yellow-crested Jackson's chameleon, Trioceras jacksonii xantholophus. This is the large green one that you see at the reptile shows and at the pet stores. Very common. It's got the overall pleasant green appearance, somewhat of a large chameleon. The male has the 3 horns and the female does not have the 3 horns. The xantholophus comes from Mount Kenya in Kenya, between 2 cities, Embu and Chogoria. It comes from a mid-elevation on the mountain, and so it gets cooler temperatures during the day and definite nighttime drops. It's difficult to nail down a chameleon on color, but it's the yellow-crested Jackson's chameleon that will have that overall pleasant lime green color. Now, there's another subspecies that we see in the trade, and that's the Machacos Hills Jackson's chameleon. It's interesting with this one, instead of calling it by its Latin name, the Trioceras jacksonii, we call it by its common name, the Machacos Hills Jackson's chameleon. And the reason why we do that is because the jacksonii subspecies actually encompasses a huge number of locales, of which we are very confident are actually different subspecies. So we're just waiting for the scientists to get around to sort it all out and give these subspecies designation or even species designation. So jacksonii is not a as uniquely identifying name as, say, the Jacksonii xantholophus is. Now, the male Machacos Hills Jackson's chameleon is a striking chameleon. It has a yellow swash across its side, green and blue in its head. It's a gorgeous chameleon. The body size is a little bit smaller than the xantholophus, the yellow-crested. But while the yellow-crested has the larger size, the Machacos Hills has the color. Perhaps an even greater defining feature of the Machacos Hills Jackson's chameleon is that the females have horns. The females can have 1 nose horn or the 3 horns just like the male. Now, these horns aren't as fully developed as the males are, but they are significant enough to where it is very difficult to identify especially younger chameleons as to whether they're male or female. Now, you can imagine how much chaos this causes when the majority of people out there believe that you can identify male Jackson's chameleons because of the horns. And so a number of female Machacos Hills Jackson's chameleons have been sold as males. And the reason why that is significant is because those people are in great danger of having surprise babies. It's enough of a surprise when you bring a female home and she has babies, but when you think you have a male and then you end up with babies, that's an extra special surprise. The Machacos Hills Jackson's chameleon comes from a geographical area separate from the xantholophus. It's a little bit further southwest from Mount Kenya. Now, the Machacos Hills are a little bit drier than where you find the yellow-crested, and so there may be a time in the future where we do separate the care between these 2 subspecies. And that's just part of what we're doing here as we grow as herpetoculturists. But at this time, I keep the Machacos Hills with the same conditions as I do the xantholophus. When I find that there's a reason for change, I will definitely let you know. The 3rd subspecies that many people are familiar with is the Mount Meru Jackson's chameleon, Trioceras jacksonii meru. This is a smaller-bodied chameleon that is found at higher altitudes. The males have a very pleasing powder blue to them and extra long horns for the size of their body. The females have a single nose horn, and I gotta say this is a very popular subspecies when it was available. Now, this is the only Jacksonii that is in Tanzania instead of Kenya. Tanzania has a complete ban on wildlife exports, so we don't see meru in the trade. There is a small breeding group in Europe that has the potential to be spread amongst the chameleon keepers of the world. But at this time, if you see any chameleons that are offered as Mount Meru Jackson's chameleons, be cautious. We have had a number of pet stores that have labeled their jacksonii as marimontanus. And so you just have to be careful. If you run into something labeled as Mount Meru Jackson's chameleon, the probability that it is minuscule but not zero. But beyond those three that many chameleon people know about, there are an amazing diversity of other Jackson's chameleons that are out there that we haven't seen. If the Jackson's group enthralls you, then I invite you to find a copy of Mountain Dragons by Jan Stapala. This is a picture book and a bit of a travel diary that Dr. Jan Stapala put together as he explored the highlands of Kenya and documented the chameleons that he found there. And in there, you're going to see a number of Jackson's chameleons and other chameleons that you've never seen before. And really, even me, I haven't seen pictures anywhere else. If you're interested in Mountain Dragons by Jan Stapala, I have a link in the description where you can get this book. It is the most gorgeous book that was made for the chameleon community, in my opinion. All right, so let's talk about Hawaii. We had a situation where a number of chameleons were brought in the early 70s for a pet store that wanted to sell them, and they escaped. The pet store owner decided to put them out on the trees in his backyard to help them recover from the trip. And when he went back out to get them, they were gone. It didn't take long before they spread across all of the islands with help from people who thought they were cute. And now Jackson's chameleons are common in Hawaii. And this is the reason why they became so common in the US pet trade. Many of them were brought over from Hawaii to the mainland and they just flooded the streets. Well, Hawaii didn't like that idea because they figured out that people were thinking, hey, this is a great idea. I'm going to go ahead and put dart frogs in Hawaii. I'm going to put other chameleons and geckos. And all of a sudden, Hawaii has all of these invasives taking hold. And so they made that illegal to take chameleons from Hawaii to bring them to the mainland. But in that time, and I don't have the details here because people aren't supposed to do this, and so they don't make it well known that they're doing this. Apparently, there have been some populations naturalized in the United States specifically for the purpose of being harvested to go to the pet trade. That's the rumor. I can't confirm it, can't deny it, no proof. But it makes sense because there's still a whole lot of the Hawaiian bloodline Jackson's chameleons still in the pet stores. And so they're coming from somewhere, and I don't think they're coming from Hawaii. So I'm sure sooner or later we'll figure that out. But this brings up a serious topic. There is a difference in bloodlines between the Hawaiian bloodlines and the Kenyan bloodlines. And that does make sense because the Hawaiian bloodlines were made up of a maximum of, say, about 36 individuals. And so there is a genetic bottleneck. We don't know how many of those actually survived or how many of those reproduced. So we don't know how much blood diversity is actually in the Hawaiian population. But we have noticed that the body size of the Hawaiian Jacksons tends to be a little bit smaller. The horns tend to be a little bit more crooked or go off in different directions. Now, you see these things in the Kenyan population, and in the Hawaiian population, you see large body and straight horns. But there's a higher incidence of these smaller body and the horns going off in different directions in the Hawaiian population. Now, the question is, what does it matter? If you're getting a Jackson's chameleon specifically for a pet, it doesn't matter. The Hawaiian bloodlines are great as pets. But if you're thinking about starting a breeding project or that you might in the future, I would highly encourage you to seek out the Kenyan bloodlines. They're harder to find, but it's a stronger bloodline. And if we're going to be breeding, we may as well do it with the strongest blood. Now, your next question is, well, how do I tell the difference? Generally speaking, if you don't know, it's probably of the Hawaiian bloodlines. If the pet store owner or the reptile show person doesn't know where it came from, it's most likely Hawaiian bloodlines because that's what's available at the wholesalers. They have to go through a couple of more hoops and it's more expensive to get the Kenyan bloodlines, and so generally they know when they've gone through those hoops. You can also tell if the table has a Machacos Hills Jackson's chameleons or the helmeted chameleon, Trioceras o'neillii, or any other species from Kenya. That indicates that the yellow crested Jackson's chameleon on that table is probably from from Kenya because they're not going to grab things from Hawaii and then grab things from Kenya. Nothing is certain, but if you're going to be doing breeding, I highly encourage you to look for the Kenyan bloodlines. So there is your summary of the subspecies of Jackson's chameleons. My favorite, I got to admit, is a Xantholophus. It's the yellow crested Jackson's chameleon. It is such a cool chameleon. So there are some options out there. Have fun with it.